The morning that changed everything began with a cardboard box, a forced smile, and a little girl who refused to let go of her father's hand. As the office doors closed behind him for the last time, Rowan Mercer realized he had lost far more than a paycheck. His career, his confidence, and the future he had promised his 8-year-old daughter all seemed to disappear in a single afternoon. Yet the greatest surprise of his life was still waiting just a few streets away, hidden behind the weathered front door of an elderly neighbor he had quietly helped every single day. The man who had taken away his job was about to answer that door, and neither of them was prepared for what would happen next. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness always finds its way back, even when life feels unfair, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Heart Kindness Tales. Every act of support helps us share more inspiring stories that remind us how powerful compassion can truly be. Rowan Mercer had never imagined raising his daughter alone. Life had rewritten his future years earlier when illness stole his wife, leaving him with grief that seemed too heavy to carry and a little girl named Nora who depended on him for everything. He learned to braid hair by watching online videos, packed school lunches before sunrise, and spent every evening helping with homework before collapsing into bed exhausted. His life was simple, disciplined, and built around one promise. No matter how difficult tomorrow became, Nora would always know she was loved. For nearly 9 years Rowan worked as a project coordinator at one of the city's largest construction companies. He was dependable rather than flashy, respected rather than famous. While others chased promotions, Rowan quietly solved problems, stayed late without complaint, and earned the trust of nearly everyone around him. He believed loyalty mattered. He believed hard work eventually spoke for itself. Then a new chief executive arrived. The company changed almost overnight. Budgets tightened. Departments merged. Long-serving employees suddenly found themselves treated like numbers on a spreadsheet instead of people with families and decades of commitment. Rowan watched coworkers disappear week after week, but he convinced himself that doing good work would protect him. He was wrong. On an ordinary Tuesday morning he was called into a meeting that lasted less than 10 minutes. The CEO never looked up for long from the folder on the desk. The explanation sounded polished and professional. Corporate restructuring. Efficiency. Difficult decisions. Rowan listened politely, signed the papers, accepted the cardboard box holding photographs and office supplies, and walked away with dignity because his daughter deserved a father who stood tall even when life knocked him down. The weeks that followed were painfully quiet. Every morning Rowan still woke before dawn out of habit. Instead of driving to work, he searched for job openings, updated resumes, and attended interviews that ended with polite rejection emails. His savings slowly disappeared into rent, groceries, school supplies, and electricity bills. Every evening he smiled for Nora even when fear kept him awake most nights. Despite everything happening in his own life, Rowan never abandoned the small promise he had made years earlier to his elderly neighbor, Eleanor Whitmore. Mrs. Whitmore lived alone in the small blue house next door. Her husband had passed away long ago, and her only son had moved overseas decades earlier. Arthritis made simple chores difficult, and climbing stairs left her breathless. Rowan had first helped her carry groceries during a rainstorm years before. That single act quietly became part of his daily routine. Each morning after taking Nora to school, Rowan stopped by Eleanor's home. He mowed the lawn, repaired broken shelves, carried laundry baskets, changed light bulbs, collected prescriptions, or simply shared tea while she talked about memories that nobody else seemed interested in hearing. He never accepted money because he knew loneliness could not be measured in dollars. Even after losing his job, he continued helping her. Some neighbors questioned his choices. They reminded him he needed to focus on finding work instead of volunteering precious hours. Rowan simply smiled. Kindness, he believed, should never depend on convenience. Nora loved visiting Eleanor too. She filled the quiet house with laughter, drew colorful pictures that decorated the refrigerator, and listened patiently to stories about gardens, old recipes, and forgotten family traditions. Eleanor often said the little girl made the house feel alive again. One sunny afternoon Rowan noticed Eleanor seemed unusually anxious. She repeatedly checked the clock and tidied the living room more carefully than usual. Family photographs were dusted. Fresh flowers stood on the dining table. Something important was clearly about to happen. She explained that a distant relative was finally coming to visit after many years apart. Rowan smiled warmly, finished repairing a loose porch step, and prepared to leave before the guest arrived. As he walked toward the gate, Eleanor suddenly remembered a basket of homemade bread she wanted him to take home. Rowan turned back and climbed the front steps once more. Before he could knock, the front door slowly opened. Standing there in an expensive tailored suit was the last person Rowan ever expected to see again. Victor Hargrove. The CEO who had dismissed him without a second thought. For several seconds neither man spoke. Rowan recognized the same calm face from the conference room where his career had ended. Victor stared back with equal disbelief, clearly recognizing the employee he had terminated only weeks earlier. Confusion filled the doorway. Victor looked from Rowan to the toolbox in his hand, then toward the freshly repaired porch, the trimmed flower beds, and the grocery bags resting beside the entrance. Eleanor appeared behind them wearing a joyful smile. She introduced Rowan as the wonderful young man who had cared for her almost every day for years without asking for anything in return. She described how he fixed broken appliances, shoveled snow in winter, carried groceries during summer heat, and made sure she never felt forgotten. Her eyes shone with gratitude as she explained that Rowan and Nora had become the closest thing she had to family. Victor's expression quietly changed. He revealed something Eleanor had never mentioned. She was not simply a distant relative. She was the older sister of his late mother, the woman who had helped raise him after tragedy struck his own childhood. Career demands had slowly separated them until years passed between visits. Guilt had followed him for a long time, and he had finally decided to reconnect before it became too late. As Victor listened to Eleanor praise Rowan's compassion, uncomfortable silence settled over him. For the first time since becoming CEO, the numbers on spreadsheets suddenly had real faces attached to them. That afternoon Rowan accepted the bread, wished them well, and returned home without expecting anything to change. He had long ago learned not to build hope around coincidences. But Victor could not stop thinking about what he had witnessed. He remembered Rowan's personnel file. Outstanding performance reviews. Perfect attendance. Countless recommendations from supervisors. The only reason his position had disappeared was because an algorithm predicted savings by eliminating experienced middle management staff. For days Victor reviewed decisions that had once seemed purely financial. He visited departments without announcing himself. He spoke directly with employees instead of reading reports. Gradually he realized how many loyal workers had been sacrificed to improve quarterly profits. Meanwhile Rowan faced another difficult reality. Rent was overdue, the refrigerator held little food, and Nora quietly pretended not to notice that her father often skipped dinner. One evening she secretly placed half her sandwich on his plate because she believed he must be hungrier than she was. Rowan smiled through tears after she went to sleep. The following morning there was an unexpected knock at the door. Outside stood a company driver holding a sealed envelope. Inside was an invitation requesting Rowan meet privately with Victor Hargrove the next afternoon. Rowan almost ignored it. Pride told him never to return. Responsibility toward Nora convinced him otherwise. When he entered the executive office, he found no lawyers, no human resources staff, and no intimidating conference table. Only Victor stood beside a window overlooking the city. For the first time, Victor spoke not as a powerful executive but as a man confronting his own mistakes. He admitted he had allowed business efficiency to outweigh humanity. Meeting Eleanor had forced him to see leadership differently. Anyone capable of showing such extraordinary kindness during personal hardship possessed qualities no spreadsheet could measure. Victor offered Rowan more than his previous position. He proposed creating a new community partnership division connecting the company's success with meaningful neighborhood outreach, employee volunteer programs, scholarships, and support for elderly residents. He wanted Rowan to lead it because genuine compassion could never be taught inside boardrooms. Rowan hesitated. Forgiveness did not come easily. Yet he also believed people deserved the opportunity to become better than yesterday. After careful thought, he accepted, not because he had forgotten the pain of losing his job, but because he saw a chance to create something that could help countless families. The months that followed transformed far more than one company. Employees were encouraged to volunteer during paid community service days. Retired workers received assistance with home repairs. Local schools gained educational grants. Elderly residents who once felt invisible suddenly found caring volunteers knocking on their doors. What began with one neighbor's quiet kindness spread throughout the entire city. Victor visited Eleanor regularly, often bringing flowers and spending afternoons listening instead of rushing away. Their relationship slowly healed, one conversation at a time. Nora watched her father smile again. She no longer worried about empty cupboards or whispered late-night phone calls searching for work. Instead, she proudly accompanied him during community events, helping plant gardens, distribute food, and read books to children at local libraries. One bright afternoon, nearly a year after Rowan had carried home that unforgettable basket of bread, the company unveiled a new Employee Recognition Award. It wasn't named after an executive or a wealthy donor. It was called the Eleanor Award for Everyday Kindness. Recipients were honored not for generating the highest profits but for quietly improving the lives of others without expecting recognition. As applause filled the room, Rowan looked toward Eleanor sitting proudly beside Nora. Tears glistened in the old woman's eyes. She knew the greatest legacy anyone could leave behind was not wealth or status but simple acts of love repeated day after day. Sometimes the biggest miracles never begin with fame, money, or power. They begin with carrying someone's groceries, repairing a broken fence, sharing a warm meal, or reminding an elderly neighbor they are not alone. Rowan never helped Eleanor because he expected a reward. He helped because kindness had become part of who he was. In the end, that quiet decision changed not only his own future but the lives of countless strangers he would never even meet. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that even the smallest act of compassion can change someone's life forever, please like this video, share it with your friends and family, leave a heartfelt comment below, and subscribe to Heart Kindness Tales so together we can keep spreading hope, kindness, and inspiring true-to-life stories around the world.